Hey, everybody. I am Craig Fitzgerald. I'm your host here for the NEMPA DriveStream with George Kennedy. And our guest today, we are absolutely thrilled to have our pal Wayne Carini. Really great to have you here, Wayne.
Great to be with you guys as always.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to ask you right off the bat, one of my favorite things, and you know, people know you from chasing classic cars and F40 motorsports. I think the thing that I love to talk about myself, and is a good way to get us started here, is to ask you some questions about your dad.
Yeah.
I was reading a bit about your father and his involvement in Model A and all of that kind of stuff. So I want to get some background from you on that.
So my dad was in the service after high school and worked at a gas station. Actually, went into the service. He was stationed over in Austria, and he really lucked out in that he had a general that war's a tough thing, but they took over basically this castle up in the mountains of Austria, and the general would liked cars. He loved cars, and so they would go and find places where the owners of the cars had abandoned the cars, and basically the general would take them.
Yeah.
And park them at the castle. And one day he said, "Who knows how to hotwire a car?" And my dad said, "I can do that." And so basically he lived with the general in the castle the whole time he was in the service, and they were going confiscating cars, which is not the right thing to do, I guess. But during war, I guess, and all bets are off.
That was in Germany or
Austria.
Austria. Sorry. Yeah. So that must have been like Horch and like all of these, auto unions and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
A little bit of everything. He came back and went back to work at the gas station, and this gentleman, farmer, a tobacco farmer, came in one day and said, "Hey, Bob, I'd like to get my old Model A running. It's out in back of the tobacco barn down the street. Would you go get it and get it running, and maybe you can paint it for me?" So this is back in the late 40s, 1948, 49, just back from the war. And he did that. But my dad went a little overboard and he restored the car. He didn't get it running or painted. He just made it look like brand new again. And the guy came to pick it up, and he refused to pay the bill. He says, "Bob, all I asked you to do was paint the car and get it running." I was expecting, like $15 or something like that. And so he says, "You can keep it, Bob. I don't want the car back." So my father kept it and started. He wanted to go to car shows with it. So he went to this one car show. It was in Windsor, Connecticut, and the guy's name was Albro Case. I always remember that. And I wasn't born even then, but we used to go to that show. Anyways, he went to pull in, and there was brass cars and classic cars there. And he got to the gate to pay his admission fee, and they said, "Well, Bob, you can't park that car in here. You got to park it across the street because that's just an old used car."
Yeah.
Got all pissed off, and on the way home, a friend of his was with him, and he says, "I'm going to create a club that they can't come to." He says, "I'm a Model A restorer. We're going to call it the Model A Restorers Club." And that's how that club got started, because of that incident. And now I'm very proud to say there's thousands of members all over the world of that club.
Well, spite is a great motivator.
Yeah. And so and I recently I went out about 3 years ago out to the there's a museum in Michigan anyways where the Ford Model A Restorers Club have a building, and so they honored him.
Oh, that's great.
That was great. And so I'm proud of that. And then it just turned into other people wanted him to do the work on their cars, and he started restoring cars. But he couldn't make ends meet just with restoring cars. He did it we had a 350-acre fruit farm, my grandfather and his brothers, and they had a cow barn where they kept some chickens and cows and stuff for milking back in the late, early 1900s. And he transformed the barn into his little body shop that he had. It was a 3-stall. and he started restoring cars. And then he had to get a job, so he worked at different body shops during the day, and then would restore the cars at night. And then he got a job at Pratt & Whitney Aircraft and did the same thing. So he got known for his quality of his restorations. And when I turned 8 years old, he put a piece of sandpaper in my hand and said, "Move back and forth." He says, "You're hired." And, and so I started actually restoring cars with him at 8. I took a Model A engine apart for my summer project because everybody at the schools always sent you home and said, "We want to know what you did during the summer, so when you come back." So I rebuilt a Model A engine. I came back to the school and I told, yeah, I rebuilt a Model A Ford engine during the summer. My teacher didn't believe me. My dad made a deal and he brought the engine to school on an engine stand, and I took it all apart and put it back together.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was deep into it, but people see that I like all sorts of different cars, and there's reasons for that. My dad restored cars and Packards and Lincolns and Duesenbergs and Model A's. My cousin, who was 10 years older than me, and he's basically my father's cousin, and he built hot rods in a lean-to next to my father's shop.
Yeah.
So I got that experience because I was his gopher, go for a beer, go for this wrench. I was the gopher guy.
Yeah.
And then up the road a mile away was Candy Poole's sports car shop. And Candy Poole was a very famous race car driver and built his own cars and stuff. And so I got a little flavor of European cars with Candy Poole's, hot rods with my cousins, and classic cars with my father.
Yeah.
It gave me a great education.
I don't think people realize what a hotbed Connecticut was, and that kind of Westchester County, all of those places in New York, and like that at that time was a real hotbed for automotive stuff, because as you mentioned, like, people don't know this, but there are tobacco farmers everywhere in Connecticut, and they'd stuff things in barns. And then there's Luigi Chinetti doing his thing with Ferraris, and Max Hoffman in New York, and all through that area is, there's 2 racetracks there. It was amazing.
You had Thompson Speedway, you had Lime Rock, you had Bridgeham, all within a short distance of each other, and you had a lot of wealth.
Yeah,
we're buying Max Hoffman, especially. They were buying all sorts of cars. Luigi Chinetti came to New York from Italy and said to Enzo Ferrari, said, in order to finance our race program, we have to sell cars. I'm going to New York City, set up shop, and start selling cars to all the super wealthy people that live in New York, actors, actresses, and
sure.
It was truly the hotbed of the industry. And through my father, I got to meet Luigi Chinetti, and because he did a work for him a little bit, and then I became his body shop, where I started repairing all of his Ferraris.
Man,
and it really took off. I mean, it was amazing. Through Mr. Chinetti, I met his son, of course, Coco, Luigi Jr.
Yeah.
And my dad used to take me down to Greenwich, usually once every 2-3 months on a Sunday. We look in the window of the Ferrari dealership, and I always remember seeing the 365P, the center steering car in there. And later in life, I got to restore that car. And
amazing.
Looking in the window at like a 12 or 13-year-old kid to actually being able to restore the car. And I kept it at my house for about 3 years after I restored it. Because he had no place to keep it, and when my children were born, we used to drive around in the car with the child seats straddle.
Crazy.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think what Craig was referring to as well, like the hotbed that Connecticut is, it sort of feeds into the mystique of the barn find. When we were reporting like yet another like specialty, European race cars found in a barn, and it's like things change hands, family members pass, it just ends up with somebody who doesn't know what it is. And when we're reporting on it, we're almost just like, how do these keep happening? But that situations like that do arise.
I mean, the cars were in garages and barns, even in parking garages in New York City. I remember that story, how Jay Leno found out Duesenberg in a parking garage. I mean, there were so many cars in parking garages or underneath buildings, brownstones with garages underneath them, things like that. And up until even like the late 60s, early 70s, the New York Times on a Sunday, you could find Lamborghini Countachs for sale. You could buy Ferraris. You know, you pick up the newspaper and you go into the city and just buy a car, and there it is sitting outside the street. I remember.
Yeah. You know, that has always fascinated me, like that era, because, you know, I remember, you know, when I worked at Hemmings, my boss, Rich Lentinello, you know, he was probably 8, 9, 10 years older than me. And he remembered that era. When you look at the Times on a, you know, this is just a local newspaper for people, and they're just, you know, they're selling couches and a Ferrari and a, you know, whatever it is. And then, you know, there was this whole culture in New York around sports cars and interesting vehicles. Like, there was, what was the name of that bookstore that everybody used to hang out in? There was a bookstore where you could buy, you know, books on these cars from all over the world. And, you know, it was just a really interesting place. And the restaurant too, I can't remember the name of that place, but there was like kind of a restaurant where, you know, people like, you know, like Max Hoffman would hang around, and, you know, people would just hang out, you know.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's a culture that's just completely gone now.
Yeah, I mean, in the Chowder Club. So, you know, the Chowder Club was journalists, automotive journalists that would meet there, because that New York City was the hub of automotive journalism back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I mean, that was the place to be. And Sardi's is where they all met once a month to share stories and talk about cars and stuff like that. And it still goes.
You like Chowder?
Chanticleer too was one of the restaurants that people used to hang out at, I think. But, you know, it was like this whole thing. It was like we were, before George, you know, we were backstage kind of talking about skiing, and it was almost the same trajectory at that time. You know, after the war, skiing and sports cars really took off.
Yeah.
And, you know, people would use these things as regular automobiles, which I think is, you know, that's definitely something that's kind of lost. And I think that's kind of a shame, you know.
Right.
Well, Europe, I used to ski in Europe, and you'd see Ferraris, Porsches with ski racks on them, and they drive them to the mountain. That's
my favorite thing.
It's still a great look. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things to see, like a Porsche 356 with a ski rack on the back of it. It's
It's classic. So, you know, obviously with that pedigree of, you know, growing up working on cars, the exposure of the different types of cars, sort of when, you know, how did that journey go from working on engines on your summer break to this level at now, where it's like you are the person that people seek out, and you go seek out these cars, and you're this, you know, known quantity of seeking out, you know, hard to find cars?
Well, you know, you work hard and you work on different things. And I became very well known for my Ferrari restorations for years. I mean, and it was because we would restore. I had the opportunity through a relationship I had with Francois Sicard, who was on the NART racing team, and he became a car restorer. And we met in Rhode Island, and I just restored a 275 Ford Cam, and he did a 500 Superfast, and we were up against each other for best in show. I knew him to talk to him, but we'd never done business together. And he won, and I was devastated. I mean, I finally made it to that level where I had a chance to win a best in show with my restoration. And he comes over to me and he says, you know, you do beautiful body and paint work, upholstery's exquisite, but you know nothing about hose clamps. And I go, what do you mean? And he opened the hood and he pointed out to all the hose clamps were incorrect. And then all these bolts are incorrect and these nuts are incorrect. He says, from now on, I do hose clamps, you do body and paint. We win every time together.
Amazing.
A beautiful relationship. We traveled everywhere in the country showing our cars. And since, you know, we've retired from doing that a little bit, but I have the knowledge, and people say, how do you know so much about cars? And the analogy is that you go to the train station to pick your mother up, and 500 people get off the train. How do you know which one's your mother? You just know. You absorb the thing. You know, when you're a kid, you all this stuff comes in and you're absorbing. It's just, you know, the guys, my father's friends talking about cars, were going to racetracks and doing all these things, and you gain the knowledge, and it just comes out. I mean, they'll ask me, what's this car? And they'll show me a picture. I go, it's this and this and this. And I go, how do you know that? I don't know how I know it. I just know it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I imagine too, like compared to modern cars where it's far more precise thing, there's like an art and science to these older cars where like different 356s, it was a different person making the body. So it's going to fit just a little bit differently, stuff like that.
Well, I mean, that was the romance back then. It was the romance era, when cars were hand built and each one was a little bit different. I restored an Iso Grifo once, and I had to put door skins on it, and the right door was half an inch shorter than the left door.
Yeah.
Well, it was just they welded it together, and then they went to put the door on. They had to shorten it up a little bit because it didn't fit in the hole. Nothing was perfection like it is today. Everything, and we're in the business through our New England Motor Press Association of test driving cars, and today there are no bad cars. Just some are better than others.
Yeah.
Cars anymore. If you remember back in the 70s and the 80s, cars were terrible. I mean, it was if you got a couple of years out of a car, it was a lot.
Yeah.
And now we see cars driving, 15, 20 years with 200,000-300,000 miles on them, and the fit and finish is beautiful. So things change, but that older era of and I got into the hot rod end of it too with my cousin, and I'm turning more to that as I get older, because my feeling is that you can buy any car you want, but if you build a hot rod, it's a form of your expression of what you think a car should be,
built, not bought. Right.
So it's it's just something how things have worked. And of course I became very lucky. So my business grew and grew. I got to be known all over the world for the work I'd been doing. And then there was a Hudson Italia in our town of Portland here. And I'd seen it when I was 16 because my father, the guy that owned it, Mr. Robinson, had brought it to my dad to fix a little scratch underneath the bumper in the front. And I fell in love with it. Now I'm 16 years old, and and most kids at 16 love Mustangs and Camaros and Corvettes. I loved the Hudson Italia.
Yeah.
It was a weird and unusual car. I pursued that car from when I was 16, and when I was 52, I finally bought it. That car, that one. And there was a time that my good friend, and I'm sure you know him, Donald Osborne.
Oh, yeah.
Donald, I told the story about it too, and he said, "Oh man, let me write a story in the New York Times about that. I've got the opportunity to do a Times story." So he took a bunch of pictures and wrote the story. It was called First Love, and you can still see it online. And it appeared as a full page automotive in the automotive section. Remember when the New York Times had an automotive section?
Yeah.
And the head of my production company, Jim Ostrowski, never read the New York Times, never saw it. But that one day he was at his mother's house visiting her, and she had the Times on the kitchen table. So he's reading it. And he reads a story about me. He calls me Monday morning and he said, "I'd like to do a TV show about you." And the rest is history. I mean, it's amazing. I said, "I'm not an actor. I don't want to be an actor. Got a thriving business. If you think it's interesting what I do, go ahead and turn the camera on, but don't ask me to repeat filming. Don't ask me to do a lot of things. Just film what I do." And it took off. And Chasing Classic Cars is in over 100 countries. My voice is dubbed in 38 languages.
That's great. Yeah, I'm. George and I, George has been on camera way more than I have. I'm more a writer and editor than anything. That being on camera part, that's a whole different job. And to do it and do it well, like there aren't that many people that can really do it well, and you're killing it. I love that show.
Well, the reason I think it all came together and it gelled so well was my crew. So basically, Jim Ostrowski unfortunately passed away of cancer, but he was the cameraman. He worked at ABC News, and he worked at all sorts of different television outlets, and started his own production company. And he was the cameraman and the producer when we started. So he was telling me, maybe you could do this, stand over there, talk, but it was the ease of doing it that, it was easy actually.
Yeah.
And before the TV show, if you put me in a room with 10 people and I had to talk to those people, I would clam up. I would get stiff. I couldn't say a word. So nervous, my heart pounding like hell. Now I get up in front and I give speeches. I get up in front of 2,000 people sometimes, and I just look out at the audience and I just talk to them.
Yeah.
And I think what people gravitate towards, though, what separates Chasing Classic Cars from a lot of the other shows out there is that it's not formulated drama. It is genuine. It's authentic. People aren't coming there for like the sizzle of a good trailer. They're coming there because they want to sort of go on that journey with you. And it's a breath of fresh air in the space.
Thank you. Well, I mean, we've brought so many people to so many events that they never thought that they could go to, and we brought them with us on television. And because I had to not recite any lines, I always remember Hannah became our producer in our third year. And we did voiceover. So, they'd film some stuff and then I had to sort of explain what the film was about, voiceover stuff. So she wrote down all these questions and gave them to me. She says, okay, I'll be at your shop tomorrow and I want you to give me the answers to these questions. And so they'd start doing the voiceover stuff. And I pause and I'm trying to think of what I'm supposed to say because I'd written down all the answers the night before. And she goes, you wrote the answers down, didn't you? I said, yeah. She goes, never mind. She crumbles the paper up. She said, I'll be back tomorrow with new questions. So then the next day and say, so tell me, remember this when we were out in Carmel at this, tell me what happened. And then I just rattle it off.
Yeah.
But if you got to pause and remember what you had written down, what the line is supposed to be, that's why I couldn't be an actor.
And there is an art in a producer who can get that out of people, ask the leading questions to get the end result that they want, and ends up making some really terrific content.
She was very good with that. So was Jim, but she was very, very good with doing that. And we had a small team, basically Jim Ostrowski and Hannah Littner and myself. That was the team, and we traveled together. People. I remember we went to buy this car. It was in Ohio, and we pulled in the morning, and they had a tent set up in the front yard, and it had a catering company. And I go, that's kind of weird, but okay. And so we were there for 15 minutes having coffee with them. They said, okay, when's the crew coming? I said, well, this is it. They go, what, you don't have a tractor trailer truck with all these people? I said, no. The caterer to feed everyone.
They set up like craft services. Yeah.
It's like your George Clooney, where's my trailer?
Only green M&Ms. Yeah. You said something a minute ago that I kind of want to unpack, and that is bringing people to shows that they wouldn't otherwise think. What does that mean? Like they wouldn't think that their car was worthy of like a concours or something like that.
A lot of people think that going to Pebble Beach is only exclusively for being invited. Well, the invitation part that you have to be invited to show your car, but that doesn't mean you can't go and enjoy it. And so Amelia Island too, and all of a sudden people are going. I mean, I get so many people that stop me at car shows and they say, "We would never be here if it wasn't for you. You showed us how easy it was to come and enjoy this, and all of a sudden now we're into cars because of you." And then I get people. I was at the Grand National Roadster show the other day in California, and this kid comes up and he has to be 17, 18 years old, and he's about 7 feet tall, and he says, I can remember watching your show with my dad when I was 5 years old. It makes me feel old, but
yeah,
if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be at this event. I just wouldn't have liked cars.
Right.
Yeah. And I think going and watching all of your shows shows that there's so many corners, so many niches. And, as time goes on, you would think that the hobby is, for the rarefied air or a certain tax bracket, but you're learning that there's these great entry points. Like I think you and I over the weekend at the winter driving event, we're talking about a Di Tommaso Pantera, right? Yeah. And, learning about these cars that, okay, it's got incredible styling, but it's got a Ford powertrain, and like there are these different niches that you can find. And so I maybe talk a little bit about, those entry points and how the hobbies evolved to make it more approachable.
Well, young people come up to me and say, "How can I get into the hobby the way you do?" I mean, I said, "So, well, first off, you work hard at it, but you buy a car." Well, I want to buy a car and take it to a car show. I said, "Oh, great." So, nothing bad to say about Mustangs and Camaros, but don't buy a Mustang or Camaro because you go to a car show and you're just one of 50 cars.
Right.
Buy a Ford Pinto, a Gremlin, whatever it is, a station wagon.
A Pacer, yeah.
It's something that people can relate to, and it's the only one at the event. And people will come up and bend your ear all day. But I remember, a Volkswagen. Everybody's got a Volkswagen store. You show up with a Beetle, and people will come over to you and talk to you all day. You show up with a Camaro, and it's just another Camaro in a line of Camaros. Now, Camaros are great cars. Mustangs are great cars. But if you want to get started involved, to get to know people, get something that everybody's going to come up and talk to you about. You don't have to break the conversation. They're going to come over and talk to you.
And so how did that rectify with like the commonality of parts and trying to find cars where like you want to find a big knowledge base and plentiful parts and affordable parts and the industry that'll support it?
Listen, and Craig said it earlier, Hemmings, I grew up with Hemmings. So Hemmings was this little thing about this big, and it was the publication. It was known as the Bible to the old car hobby. My dad used to, every month, it used to be a first class mailing service. So you got it, 2 or 3 days before anybody else, so you paid that extra $1.50 or whatever it was. But what he did is that he wasn't a very rich guy at all, didn't have very much money at all, but he would dog ear the pages of the cars he was interested in. He'd circle the ads, and he'd put next to his chair in the dining room had a stack of Hemmings. And then every Sunday he would go and he'd pull the bottom one out, and he'd go through and he'd call that ad. And if that person had that car still, and it's like a year later, you could really get a deal on it. And that's how he bought a lot of cars.
I used to hear a lot of stories about people doing that, but it wasn't in the living room; it was in the bathroom. They had a stack of Hemmings. It was like, I can't tell you. You know who Lee Keno from Antiques Roadshow told me that. He's like, my dad had a stack of those in the bathroom.
Well, everybody lived and died. New York Times and Hemmings. That's how you found stuff. And looking behind garages. I mean, every Sunday my dad would take us out for ice cream, but it was the longest ice cream trip ever, because it was a 3-hour drive looking behind people's houses and
So one thing I wanted to ask you too about this is, I was looking at, the other half of your business is F40 Motorsports, which, you sell, amazing cars. Like there is a collection of stuff in there that, that you've got for sale now. That's like, some of these things I have never seen before. And it was my business to be involved in this stuff, but something really stuck out to me. And it was that XK120 you have for sale. And, I'm really interested, and I was when I was at Hemmings, and I still am, about market shifts and how, like, something like Model A is a perfect example. Like I remember in the 70s and early 80s, the Model A's with a V8 were the muscle cars of its era. Like that, they were gold plated, and now you almost can't pay to restore one and expect to get any of the money back.
You can't.
So that market has shifted, and that XK120 is 60 grand. And like, Ferraris that competed with that are orders of magnitude more expensive. So tell me a little bit about that and that market shift and how that's changed.
Well, I mean, and so people always say, what's the car I should buy? And I say, well, buy the one with the lowest production. Great car with low production. Ferraris would only build so many cars.
Right.
And then, if it was 1,000 or 100, whatever the number may be. So we're restoring a 330 GTS now. They made 100 of those cars. So if you want one, I mean, they command now, $2.5 to $3.5 million for that car. Right. When I sold mine, unfortunately, it was only about $150,000.
Right.
Don't hang on to that stuff. But and I think that drives it. And and trends too. So we see, for instance, XKs. So I have the Dave Garraway 61 XK. I sold it to a client. He had his fun. It's back to sell. We can't get half of what he originally paid me for the car because that market has taken a nosedive.
Crazy.
Nobody's in, but 3 years ago, they were the hottest thing on since sliced bread. I mean, they were in a spectacular car to own and drive and enjoy, but the trend is going to modern cars now more and more. People want a car that they can know that it's going to get you from point A to point B. People always say, "Will I have problem with this car?" And I said, "Count on it."
Yeah,
right.
But that's half the fun.
Exactly.
By the road, getting to know new people and all these things. I mean, it's fun.
I think that's where the popularity of 4x4s and trucks have come from. There's just this like desire to go exploring, overlanding, but also like, hey, this isn't just something that I can only take to like a Lime Rock weekend, or I gotta like take care of it for a Sunday drive. I can go kind of be brutal with it and go camping with it and tow with it and stuff. And it's still this thing that I really desire that'll turn heads.
Well, and so we're looking at generational shifts. And so generational shifts are, that buyer today wanted one of those when he was young, because that's what his dad had, his uncle had Broncos. They had, IH Scouts. They had all these vehicles. And now they've made enough money, and mom and dad have passed on and left them a ton of money too, because we find that, parents die, they live in a little house their whole life, but they bought GE stock in 1940, worth like $10 million today.
Right.
So they're coming in, they want to buy what they thought of. I mean, in my generation, for instance, I grew up around the hobby, so I'm a little bit different, but everybody wanted a Corvette. Even in high school now, I wanted a Z28 Camaro so bad. In my senior year, I just started my senior year, and I saw a Sunoco gas commercial with Mark Donahue driving a Z20 Camaro and shifting the car at 8,000 RPMs. And that's what did it for me. It wasn't the look. It was that engine spinning that fast. I said, I got to have one of these. And there was a local Chevy dealer. I'd go up there a couple times a week and go and look at them. I never got one, but yet it was that lust. For some reason, that pushed my button, and there's a lot of people, with off-road vehicles today, that's what they wanted. And then it takes the auction. So the auctions have a lot to do with it too, because you'll get a vehicle like, let's just call it's a Bronco, and the Bronco goes across the block at Barrett Jackson. It sells for $350,000, and I go, oh my God! Well, all of a sudden, everybody thinks their Bronco's worth $350,000.
Yeah.
But it brings the market up. It carries those.
Sure. It brings attention to those cars that like they never got before. You know?
Bodies for them. I mean, they become the resto mods, and you'll see that market. It'll start to trend. It'll peak, and now starting to really go down. I mean, if you ever told me that an International Scout would sell for 150 to 200 grand, I'd say you're insane, because they were junks when they were new.
Yeah.
But they restore them to such perfection they become really good vehicles.
Right.
Well, I look at those things like, Scout and Blazers. Like I had a 79 Blazer, and man, you want to talk about a crappy, terribly built automobile. It was that. I loved it, but it was put together on an assembly line. There were 3 strikes by the time that thing ended up, leaving the assembly line. And that, like, at the top end, that is selling for more than, like hand-built Pierce Arrows are selling for. And it's insane to me. It's like the inherent value kind of goes away on some of these hand-built things, and it just goes to what's popular,
Right. And a lot of people buy what's popular.
Yeah.
A lot of people go to Barrett Jackson just to say they bought their car at Barrett Jackson.
Sure.
I bought a car at Barrett Jackson. And I paid $350,000. That really proves to me that you're an idiot.
Right. Had that conversation a lot at Hemmings. And I get, like there'd be I bought this car at Barrett Jackson on a Friday. The first phone call I made was to Hemmings Motor News saying, "When are you going to do a feature on my car?" It's I'd much rather talk to somebody who's owned a car for 30 years. I'd much rather talk to a guy who bought one new, who has kept it. it's not the car, it's the story more for me.
Yeah. Well,
Still,
people see people cheering people when they bid a lot of money for cars. They're cheering because they're going, "Oh my God, what a bozo that guy is." Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
I listen. I go to a lot of auctions. I love auctions, and it's enthusiasm. And I overpay myself. I've overpaid for plenty of things. I get them wrapped up. I've learned over the years. I take a pen and I write the numbers down on my hand. I'm a look. I go, no, I'm not another bit. Well, maybe a little more, and you end up.
So I understand, Wayne, that you've got a book coming out in April, and you can pre-order this on all your favorite, Amazons and all those kind of places. Tell me a little bit about what made you want to do that.
Well, how really it started is that I wanted to. I have a grandson, 9 years old, and a granddaughter. She's 4, and I wanted to. We started reading books together, and my uncle wrote children's books. One of my uncles, and I always thought it was very, very cool how he he did his own illustrations in the book, wrote the book, and he making a great living selling children's books. I said, that'd be kind of cool to write my own children's book. So I wrote this book called Pop-Ups Cars, and it's the story of Connor talking about his Pop-Ups cars and how much he likes them. It's the stories through his eyes.
Sure.
And then somebody says, well, you should write a story about yourself, about your life. Your life is very interesting, which I don't really think so, but most people do. And so we started that project a bunch of years ago. It sort of took a big pause, and then we got back on it about 4 months ago. And I just got off the phone with my writer, and the publishing company, and we did a bunch of pictures, doing captions for pictures today. So we're within 6 to 8 weeks of going to press. It's called Wayne Carini, My Life with Cars. And it's going to be, so there's going to be 2 books. One is before chasing classic cars, and then the second one's going to be called My Life with Chasing Classic Cars.
Oh, that's great.
So we tee it up at the end of the first book, just start to talk about chasing classic cars. And then there's so many stories and so many great people I've met. I mean, and that's, to me, the cars are great, but it's relationships that I've gained over the years. I've got to meet people that, I looked up to and never thought I'd ever be able to even talk to them and shake their hand. Now they're really great friends of mine,
That's exactly right.
That's
my experience with you, Wayne, just so you know. It's funny because you and I met in such weird circumstances that I kind of came in through the back door and almost realized oh man, that's Wayne who's on television every week. It was really a treat to get to meet you,
Amazing. I would love to meet, certain people in my life, and I've gotten to probably meet 90% of those, that I'd named off. But people walk up to me sometimes, and I feel so bad for them. They're shaking. They're so wound up. They're shaking. Their heart's pounding. And I calm down. It's just me. There's nothing special about me, really. Oh no, but you don't understand. I said, I don't understand, but okay, come on, let's do this. Yeah. And I talk to people, and if people, and that's I guess one of my best suits is that if you want to talk to me, I'll talk to you for however long you want to talk.
Yeah.
If a car show or something, okay, I got to move on. But people stand there and talk to me about their cars or show me pictures, and I spend the time to listen to them and to talk to them, and they really love that. And I take the time to take pictures and sign autographs. I'll never say no to any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I get my friends that walk around me, how can you do this all day like that? I said, I don't know.
I love it. I love it.
Oh, you got to be kind to everybody. And I was that way, be kind to everyone in the world. Don't judge a book by its cover, that type of thing. My whole family taught me that. And be a man of your word. My uncles, I had 3 uncles that were home builders, and they built all really high-end homes in Glastonbury and Wethersfield, and they never had a contract. They built the person's house on a handshake.
Yeah.
Never had a contract in their lives. And so that's the way I've always said, be honest. If you lie, it's the worst thing in the world. First off, because you can't live with yourself. And then it's, then you're trying to cover things up. Always tell the truth, no matter how it is. If we're doing a project here at the shop and I find something wrong with somebody's car and I missed it, the first time when I give them the estimate, I feel terrible about calling them. But if you don't call them right away and break that envelope, then you feel, oh God, I feel so much better. You carry that. If you tell lies, you're carrying that weight constantly. So I told my dad a lie once and I regretted it. And that was the last time I ever told a lie in my life.
Yeah.
But the story I love to tell is how we actually met, because it's how I got my start, essentially. I was already working in a video production company for cars at the time, but I hadn't been doing actual editorial journalism. And we have a mutual friend, or I have a friend that works at the Boston Globe at the time, Cliff Attia, who's now NEMPA's president. Right. And I was like, hey, can I write something for you guys? I've got tons of stuff I want to talk about. He just goes, yeah, you kind of need a hook so I can bring this to my editor. And it was the open house at F40. And there was somebody there who knew you. And I asked him for a favor, and he just plowed through the crowd to get to you. And you gave me the time of day. And we sat down on a Fiat Jolly with the wicker chairs in the back of your garage and talked for 30 minutes. And I was like, with everything going on, the fact that you would take the time of day, somebody, that just wanted to try and write about cars. And that's how I got my start writing for the Globe, with that article.
Great. And I got to know Bugsy. It was so funny. So on my 50th birthday, my wife threw this big party. All my friends and relatives came from all over the country. It was a big moment. Wayne's turning 50. Now I look back, I wish I was 50 still. But, she said, what's the one thing you want for your birthday? I said, I'd love to have lunch with Click and Clack, the Tappet brothers. I would listen to Car Talk every week. I laughed so hard. I'm driving a car and I'm crying. Tears running, laughing so much, And it wasn't the circumstances. It was Tommy and Ray's laughter itself made me laugh more,
Yep.
And so they got a hold and they said, man, we don't do that. We don't go to birthday parties or anything like that. So they sent me a coffee mug and a t-shirt. And I was at a Newport Concours and I met Bugsy. And then that's how I met Raymond.
Yeah.
Was Bugsy. And then once I started to be on TV, that was way before TV. I got a call from Bugsy one day and he said, would you come and be our guest speaker at the NEMPA Awards banquet? I said, sure. He says, all you got to do is stand up there and talk for 5 or 10 minutes, and that's all we want. Well, I walked in the door, and they handed me this booklet of papers. There's got to be...
That was me.
Yeah. and I said, what's this? And you're the MC tonight. Go, what do you mean I'm the MC? Well, you got to give all these awards. We'll help you with with the names of the people. Yeah. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. And I go, okay.
It was great. That's one of my favorite. It was my favorite experiences. It's like the look on your face was like, I had planned on being out of here in about 25 minutes.
What have I gotten myself into?
So listen, one of the things before we wrap up, I don't want to take up too much of your day here, but we always try to talk about kind of modern stuff too. You've had experience with everything for years and years, and I'm interested in what you've driven over the last year or so that has kind of, interested you or made you think about, what are the things you love to drive in the last year or so?
Well, I've never been a person to buy myself a new car. My wife always gets the new car in the family, and I take the hand-me-downs, and so. But recently, I bought myself an Audi RS6 Avant station wagon, and the reason,
nice.
Everything's a purpose or a reason, though, for me to substantiate the purchase. I always make excuses up. My wife will say when I buy a car, "What'd you buy that for?" I said, "Well, it's for Connor's, for my grandson." She goes, "Connor, my butt." She goes, "Quit using that kid as your crutch," So I substantiate things. So I went to Bonneville. I have a Bonneville car, and I wanted to go 200 miles an hour in my Bonneville car. Well, the transmission broke. I never got to do it. So I come home and I find this Audi RS6 wagon, Avant wagon, will do 200 miles an hour with the ceramic brake system. and you got to do a little chip with it. So I bought it because I want to go 200 miles an hour in a station wagon with 4 other people in the car, a dog and luggage, with the air on and music blasting.
Crazy.
So we'll do it. That's the reason. But the cars that we've been driving, I mean, I was never really interested in electric cars, but the more I drive them and the more I find how fun they are, they're great to drive. Now, the mileage thing is, they still got to figure that out, because I got trapped one day. I went to Boston, Mass General, for a doctor's appointment. And on the way home, I was driving, I won't say what kind of car it was. And I had 55 miles to go to get home, and I only had 22 miles left in the charge.
Yeah.
But I'd figured, calculated the whole trip out. I ended up leaving the car at one of the dealership and took an Uber home.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because it was 11:30 at night and nobody was open, and I couldn't find a charger. So that little bit of a knot in your stomach when you're driving.
Absolutely.
But I think they're great vehicles. They have a place in our society, and it's great to be able to drive different things every week. I mean, people say, "What's your favorite?" I really can't have a favorite because they're all so freaking good.
So it doesn't matter, right? Yeah, yeah.
But we went the other day, and the one vehicle that just got me recently, and it's an EV, is the Chevrolet Equinox. It's got great mileage on the charge. I think it's just over 400 miles on a charge. Now that's getting really in the territory. I think we should have 500 miles on a charge.
Yeah.
And it's comfortable to drive. My wife never says anything. We went out to dinner one night and we took it, and she goes, "What kind of car is this? This really rides great." Well, it's got heavy batteries in the bottom of it, and oversized tires on it because of that. But I think that things like that are great. Listen, I drive Ferraris and I drive Porsches and I drive all this stuff, but I really am. I look at all these different cars and all the electronics in them and stuff. I get a little afraid of that for the future. But yet they go and go forever. I'm a Ford truck guy, and so I enjoy driving the Lightning. The R, Raptor.
The Raptors, and
Raptors, the stuff with the horsepower. I did buy, when the Demon came out, I did buy a Demon, and I thought that was a fabulous car.
Yeah.
I bought a GT350R Mustang, another fabulous car, and performance cars. But I think that the manufacturers have got it down. There's one thing, and in my reviews, which you can find on Wayne Carini on YouTube, I do automobile reviews, is the electronics bug drive me crazy. And maybe that's because of my age and my my upbringing. But I like knobs. I don't like got to find things.
It's a constant issue with me, and I mean, I'm a bit younger than you are, but I fight with it constantly. Like the more that touch screen thing kind of comes through, it's like, and you're starting to see it pull back now. So Subaru and Hyundai starting to kind of come back to knobs and buttons. Like, you don't want to overdo it like a Pontiac 6000 from 1986, buttons all over the steering wheel and everything. But there's a happy medium there that needs to happen.
I had the Infinity, the Q80, is it?
Oh yeah.
I had that, and it was a great vehicle. I made the comment too that a 3.6 liter twin turbocharged is putting out 425 horsepower. I mean, a Hemi Cuda, you'd have to buy a Hemi Cuda back in the 70s to get that much horsepower.
Exactly.
Right.
Doing that. And then this week, and I just gave it up yesterday, was the Nissan Murano, which is basically the same vehicle as the Infinity. And I actually like the Nissan Murano a little bit better because of the knobs. So it doesn't have all the computer skills, the screens that the Infinity had, but yet I thought it was easier to navigate that kind of stuff.
And I'm in that right now, and I just got it yesterday, and it's a clean design. It doesn't have the same, it's a nice car, but it feels like it used to be its own thing, its own niche of like mid-size 2-row SUV. Like the Passport was really the only other one while everybody else is going for cargo space and a lot of seats. This was like, we're focusing on 2 rows, like the Terrain was for a little while, or the Acadia before that, perhaps. And that it's not really that anymore. It sort of just feels like a large Rogue, as opposed to what it was before, where it was like kind of beamy and spacious. The seats are insanely comfortable. Like I don't know what they're doing over there, but
they're great. But it's a big vehicle, and I said in my report, I said if you want an Escalade or an Expedition, something like that, look at these vehicles because they're the same size, but they're massive. That grill in the front hood, it's so huge.
Oh yeah, on the QX80, yeah.
And
that's that truck thing too, where it's like, it's like things have gotten squared off and tall now rather than getting wide and long. It's like, man, the hood on this thing is like, it's like shoulder height. So, it's got to stop at some point.
I'm short and I don't put the seats way up in the car. I sort of like to sit in the car, not on top of the car.
Yeah.
And I can't see over the hood to see where the lines are when I'm parking the damn thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, I wonder if part of that is the design for like the pedestrian safety, where it has to be like, it can't be a wedge. But once again, like there are these things where the number of regulations put the auto designers in a box.
Yeah.
And it has, people do say, there are no bad cars, but cars are sort of moving towards this almost like homogenous singularity, right?
Yeah.
Where there's like a lot of shared design language where like you go to a Mercedes dealer and unless they're side by side, I can't tell you the difference between like a C-Class, an E-Class, and an S.
What letter combination is this?
Right. So
Yeah,
I wonder if that's one part of it.
Lost that little edge that they had before. It's sort of like BMW, the same thing. I mean, I love both models and I love both brands, but they get to look homogenous. They look a lot alike, no matter what class you are. I think that's what killed Mercedes in a lot because, it's like a class war when somebody bought a Cadillac, or you bought a Mercedes. At least with General Motors, there was a Cadillac, there was an Oldsmobile, Pontiac.
Right.
You went down the line as to where your financial means brought you. And with Mercedes, they made a let's say a 450 SEL, and then they made a 280 smaller version. And so the guy that cleans your pool is driving a Mercedes and you're driving a Mercedes. If they called it something else, it would work. But a lot drive in that realm of I got to have something that's bigger and better than the next guy. They poo-pooed that, and I think
for me, like that era where BMW was like small, medium, and large. You fit in what price bracket that like the 7 Series was just, you couldn't recognize it for anything else. But it was also, it had this family resemblance to the rest of the lineup. So if you're driving the 318, you can feel like, oh, we have a family relationship here. And all of that's kind of lost now,
Yeah, it is. It is.
And that's
the thing that, and I don't listen to the radio very much. It's just noise in the background with me. I'm either thinking about work or the next thing I got to do and concentrating on my driving. I'm not a person that talks on the phone in the car. I want to be in control of the automobile. But AM radio, and I'm really sounding old because I like to listen to AM radio, talk radio, or whatever it may be. AM radio's disappeared out of a lot of cars. I'm driving a Volvo this week and there's no AM radio.
Yeah. The band's gone. Yeah.
And so, and the screens are sometimes really big and you don't have to have it that big, but the new Infiniti and Nissan, they got that flat screen that goes across. I think that's really great.
Yeah.
And the trucks, Ford has a larger, vertical screen that goes up and down, not horizontal so much, and that fits in. But some of these screens that pop out of the dash, you can barely see the other side through the windshield.
Right. Well,
I'm not necessarily in the car to be entertained. You know what I mean? I do still like driving the car. I will, as soon as something can get me through Hartford without having to pay attention to anything, I'll buy that in a second. But I do like driving the car, and that seems to be going away too. There's a lot more focus on entertainment inside.
When COVID hit and everything shut down, I had just bought a new Corvette. So I got a C8 Corvette and I had it coming. Ken Lingenfelter gave me one of his allocations. And so I got on the list. I got my new Corvette. And I'm a person that I'm in business, and so my mind's always going. Unless I'm in an older car in a rally or something like that, I want to get from point A to point B as fast as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And because of COVID, my autistic daughter and I decided to go out for a ride every Saturday with her. So we'd get in the Corvette with no place to go. There was no destination. There was no restaurants open. There was nothing. You could maybe find a Dunkin' Donuts for a coffee, and that was about it. It was the best driving experience I'd ever had because we had nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Saw more towns than through Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and I had no idea. I just turned. I said, "That looks like a nice road," and I turned right and go down the road. And
what a gift!
It was the best experience ever. I mean, her and I. She has no speech, and so I talk. She listens, and she knows what I'm talking about. And it was that bonding between her and I, and nowhere to go. It was the best, and the car was too, but the experience of being with her and doing those things, and that's part of automobile. You get together with your friends, and friendship and automobiles go together. You go for rides with the kids and get ice cream. Those are the most important things about an automobile, and the rest of it is just going to work, and it's homogenous. They're appliance, but people say, "What do you think about?" I don't know. It's an appliance. Has certain soul, and you got to have a car that's got soul.
Well, Wayne, this has been great. Thanks for taking the time to do this. I want to mention again, you've got a book coming out in April. You can pre-order that on all your favorite bookseller websites. And there's the show, there's F40 Motorsports. Check that website out because there's a great inventory of stuff for sale there. And I just want to thank you.
If I've just 2 more minutes. So my new project is not only the book, but I started my own television network, Speed Vision, and I want to tell people about that. So Discovery Channel, Motor Trend left Discovery Channel and then came back because they had some financial problems. Well, Motor Trend is totally out of business except for showing reruns. My contract was up with them, and they didn't renew it, and with everybody else too. There's no new show on Motor Trend. So Bob Scanlon, who was the president of Velocity Channel, and I and 3 other former employees of Discovery started our own network called Speed Vision. We're streaming. We're working on some really cool deals right now where we'll be built into certain televisions like Samsung's and different televisions where we'll be the automotive channel on that TV. When you buy, we're automatically in the television. So those are new and exciting things that we're doing. I have a new show that we're filming called Catching Classic Cars. And one of the big reasons that I wanted to leave chasing classic cars is I was away over 200 days a year from my family and my business. And I sort of wanted to tame that down a little bit. It was getting very, very tiresome. So it's about my collection of cars that I bought for other people in the past and sold to them. So it's going to be a really cool show. We'll do probably 8 to 10 episodes a year of that. And then we have a podcast of our own, Jay Ward and I, talking classic cars. So you can find that on the internet too. So just a little plug at the end. Sorry to drag.
Absolutely. We're happy to do that for you, Wayne. And we're going to plug ourselves too. Make sure to like and subscribe on all your favorite podcast platforms and YouTube. You can find us on LinkedIn and Facebook, New England Motor Press Association. So thanks again, Wayne, and we're looking forward to seeing you the next time.
We'll be here. Thanks so much. We'll see you guys soon.
See ya.
Thank you. Bye.